The Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program represents a rewarding academic professional development opportunity for faculty at Montgomery College. The fellowships are a product of a unique collaboration between Montgomery College and Smithsonian Center for Education and Museum Studies. It's the first of its kind between the Smithsonian Institution and a community college.
Swift Stiles Dickison earned a BA in English at the University of California, Berkeley, an MA in English with a concentration on creative writing at Sonoma State University in Rockville Park, California, and a PhD in English with an emphasis on Caribbean literature at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington. Growing up, he lived in Damascus, Syria, the Virgin Islands, Guadalajara, Mexico, and Northern California. He has traveled and worked in the Caribbean, Europe, China, Australia, and New Zealand. Swift has presented his scholarly work at the International Conference on Caribbean Literature since 2000, reading papers in Puerto Rico, Grand Bahama, Martinique, St. Croix, St. Lucia, Trinidad, and Cuba. He has taught world literature, creative writing, Caribbean literature, post-colonial literature, American literature, modern poetry, and composition. Besides teaching, he enjoys writing fiction and poetry and playing percussion and guitar for the Montgomery College World Ensemble.
Thanks for hanging around. Where are the fellows? We've got a nice good core of fellows. Well, I was going to start by saying I'm going to keep this water nearby, so don't want to reach for this. I know the joke's been used, but as the blind man in Raymond Carver's story, Cathedral, once said, learning never stops. And I'm sure today has been one of those days, just listening to David and deciding whether I was as nervous as David or, oh yeah, sorry, but I'll try to, I won't dry up. But it's great to see you all, and thanks for hanging around, being patient, and so on. It was a pleasure to do the fellowship. This title here, I just want to point to the world first, because that was a bit of an opportunity for me to push my agenda a little bit, not to be a demagogue, but again, in the post-country first sort of world we're in, I thought the world first would be good because, you'll see why in a moment. But in this course, English 101, composition, we can see that, it's good. We can see that we're looking at writing essays, of course, but in this case, I just dispensed with the textbooks. I figure the Smithsonian is an opportunity. What's the term? The Smithsonian effect, I think someone said? Recently discovered scientific reality. But the students are able to go to the museums, and they're using articles that I photocopied and, of course, point to the internet for them as well. And I wouldn't recommend necessarily dispensing with a text, but it did give me license to use whatever I wanted to relating to American identity, experience, and the museums as well. So you can see here that the field work is what I'm emphasizing, English 101. And these are the museums we focused on. I'll kind of move pretty quickly because, again, I touch upon them all a little bit. The Written in Bone was optional, but these are the main ones, the Portrait Now, and you've seen, of course, some images from that one. Also, the Slavery at Jefferson's Monticello, Paradox of Liberty, was an interesting one to use for classification, division, cause and effect, causal analysis, as well as reflective response to that, the paradox. And then the Native American Museum we used as a natural one for the identities, as you can see in the title there. So those are the three, all mandatory visits, so you can get your class going that way. The students have to come down there, and they hopefully will be there at a time when I meet with them, and actually I'm able to guide them through. With the first gallery, we actually had a docent, which was quite nice, because the docent was able to give us a really nice tour of some of the exhibits there. So these are some of the points here, and I did generate through exercises the content for the essays. That is to say, they would go in and focus on objects and then use those objects to generate content for the essays. So you can see some of the instructions here. Study the work of 5 artists, commenting on the identity and kind of generating the content there. Sijo has been mentioned, and there's some good images we've seen already. The description here that she offers us. What I like for 101 is the students could pick up phrases from the artist as well as from the plaque and perhaps from the website and the brochure, and bring them in, even though it's not English 102, they bring them in to synthesize those quotations and make them speak to the art as well, and their own thoughts come into play also. So silent direct, informational physiognomy was a nice term she used there in the photographs. And we've seen the broad spectrum. How many were there? About 200, is that correct? The photographs? Quite a few. Well, we get a famous figure here, and the artist has depicted him in the clothing that he's selected, but also in a pose that is consistent with the other subjects. And what's important for the students is the description of him that they would convey in their writing, but also what he says about himself. Of course, the autobiographical statement, and the artist leaves him to speak for himself in that sense. So these are the instructions for that, generating that text for that essay. Okay, and quoting from the artist as well to get some sense of what we're looking eventually at art as argument, and we saw that with some of the works, art as argument. So that helps to, and this is a statement that she makes, that is to be Korean American is to do that. And of course, a very a dramatic pose in a way, and so just wanted to show you that image of her. Photographs were touch and go because some of the exhibits we could not photograph them, so you have to pick these up where you can willy-nilly. But students are not as cautious as we are. They snuck some photographs in there. So in any case, this one, Roger Shimomura, a Japanese American, the only male artist among the five, the eldest of them as well. But we'll see some of his works in a moment here. Focusing on the racist stereotypes. They are looking at 3 paintings. I mean, to be honest with you, a student could do this exhibit, could do the whole course, You could write 4 or 5 essays on this exhibit. But, so it's a bit spread. But in this case, looking at him, we got 3 paintings, looking at his argument, quoting from his points again. The sense that he's battling stereotypes. This is a fellow who I think was raised in Kansas, 3rd generation Japanese American, and he is often asked what part of Japan he comes from. So, he's trying to battle this sense of misconception. Sometimes humorously. In this case, American versus Japs 2, you can see the artist depicted in the center. Around him, the sort of racist, stereotypical Jap generals, post-Pearl Harbor images, no doubt, but he is kind of battling them away, and I think students could sort of see what he's doing dramatically here and write about that and learn a bit about the history as well as they work. A little bit more whimsical perhaps is the American Pikachu, but what's interesting to me is one of my students, a Japanese American fellow, actually said that this is the American Pikachu because that's the American face in Pikachu, who's a Japanese character. So the American, reminding us that yes, of course, Shimomura is American. And it's interesting. It's striking because students can see this, they recognize what it is playing with, and they can speak to it. Likewise, a little strange in the sense of the gender bending perhaps, but there is American Hello Kitty. We weren't sure quite what to make of this. Your guess might be better than mine, but it's interesting what he's doing there. So then Sal de Mando, Mexican and Japanese descent, has these visual biographies, and you saw the pamphlet go around, and you saw one image already, a beautiful kind of a painting of, as she says here, well, her friends, the mundane social moments designed to glorify everyday people whose existence is the embodiment and the legacy of historical struggle, which is very interesting because she's working from the ground up there with people around LA. The kids that she paints are to be dramatized as real individuals who have a culture, but they're not glorified in art normally, right? So these visual biographies, we'll see one here. The Carm's crew, nicely depicted there with the gold on the wood, and they are glorified, but it's also an ordinary group of friends or people she knows, certainly. Now, what's interesting also is that in this case, the student might just go there because she wasn't able to join our group, so she then photographs herself illegally, I might add, in front of this image. But that's what students will do. They're going to break the boundaries for you, and hey, you want to? I'll prove I was there. Take a picture. There it is. I'm afraid with the internet and such, we're going to be facing that a lot. That some of these boundaries will be crossed. So, but there she is. So then the essays come out of that. The narrative of identity, the personal narrative comes out of that in that sense, incorporating elements of portraiture now. Okay, and use the website as well. We're interested in integrating and synthesizing some of these quotations and paraphrases and points they make to show that they can survive in 102, certainly, out of 101, but it brings them into the museums. So some of the responses, Walter says, Shimamura's exhibit at the National Portrait Gallery is vibrant, eye-catching, whimsical, enlightening. Through his use of portraiture, he lays bare American stereotypes of Asians, simultaneously attacking and disrupting them. My parents came to America in the 1980s seeking asylum from the Civil War in El Salvador. They lingered in limbo for years trying to earn the citizenship they had been promised. So clearly the student is making a connection to the text, if you will, which is the artist's work. And another one says, adapt and deal. That is exactly what you have to do as an immigrant. You cannot run away because there's absolutely nothing to run away to. You're forced to deal with the situation head on. You are stuck in the new environment. And even though it feels like you will never be able to relate culturally, with every passing minute and every lingering year, there it is again, they got that somehow, you will allow a very small fraction of yourself to slowly conform and alter. So that's pretty articulate for 101, you know, the big zero between parallel lines. Tanya says, you know, she had moved to Canada from Iran, and she looks at Hai Yun's self-portrait videos. I don't have these featured here, but they're wonderful. The videos of the artists in various poses. She's trying to eat some tomatoes with cherry tomatoes with a ruler, showing the difficulty of adjustment as an immigrant might face. And so this student says, every situation summons different customs, requiring me to adopt unfamiliar behaviors in order to conform to expectations. How painful it was, she's quoting the artist there, of course, but how painful it was to walk through the doors of my new high school. My hands were sweating, my heart was beating fast, and I was trembling. So, you know, physiological connection to the artist's argument, which I think is astounding, really. Reach that water, it's good. So, and then we do move into essay 2, just kind of quickly noting that slavery at Jefferson's Monticello was a wonderful one for them to classify the enslaved families, Granger, etc. We know some of these families. But I was interested in what happens to the families. Of course, the exhibit did give us those results, you know, and also their ancestors, sorry, their descendants are living today. So the students would follow that in the exhibit and determine, you know, how people have done, how it's affected their lives and their children's lives. So a very rich possibility there, I think. And again, focusing on 5 crucial objects to kind of ground the essay a bit, away from the abstractions, right? So the Shackles, she talks about the Shackles a little bit and describes how they were for a young girl named Clary. Okay, and this is her quotation. Tabby says, she must have been a child, and I'm just going to show you the image that she takes a picture of here, impressed by these shackles. So the student takes a photograph there. This time it was legal, I think. But you know, there they are, and they're, you know, very powerful. These objects, we live in a pretty visual culture these days, I'm afraid, and for better or for worse. And that, you can read a paragraph about it, but this, to these students, it really gives them a concrete image. And so she says about the families, the Granger and Gillettes are being contrasted. One receives a salary, the other works under harsh conditions, you know. And although Jefferson said he had most perfect confidence in Edward Gillette, he did not care enough to free him in his will. And this is part of this paradox. He frees very few. And I think at the very least these students come away with the sense that Jefferson is you know, a very amazing father, but also someone who had peers in his time who were certainly more enlightened than he was in some ways, maybe morally, and you know, and so on. So, okay, so Taisuke, the Japanese-American fellow, says, you know, was he really a hero for many slaves? I think he's referring to the fact that he helped them out, trained them, gave them, some of them, money and certainly skills. But some would disagree, and he says, picking favorites and slave labor should not be coming from a man who wants equal rights for slaves. I view Thomas Jefferson as a man with a kind heart, but an economist's mind. Kind of interesting pragmatist there. And the other object here, the bill of sale. The bill of sale, they take that photograph. So that moves them to comment on this. Shauna says this: a Negro girl slave named Clary, 1805, sold for 50 pounds. The object also represents themes of pain and power. I mean, that's a nicely put, disturbing point there. So the student definitely must have felt pain because she did not have the right to stand up for herself. The object also introduces power of the owner of a slave, and so on. So they are getting something out of these exhibits, there's no question. Moving on, just for some images, here they are, Taisuke and the others, studying at Our Lives, the American Indian Museum, right? You can sort of see them. What was interesting, I tended to generate the content through my exercises for them, and at this point I said, why don't you create the exercise? Find what you want to write about. What interests you to make it more, what's the buzz phrase, intentional learning? Endless possibilities? That sounds better than multiple choice, right? Yeah. Okay, so, that whole sense of give the students a little drive in this. And this fellow was very interesting because he brought his mother with him to the museum. He brought his mother, and I was very moved, that you bring the family in there. I don't think it was to babysit him. It was like education, learning never stops, right? I mean, there it is. And they're looking to find objects. I think they're actually just posing for the camera in this case. But when back in the classroom, they are putting together these exercises, so they actually are collaborating around the computers and creating exercises for themselves, and they can write the papers based on that content. So here they are again, student designed. And I think that really gives them a little autonomy there, a little bit of, what's the word, agency, do we say? Something like that. So the culminating essay then, they're running an argument or definition paper, of course focusing on, if you design the whole course around American identity, you can really culminate it in this business of drawing upon some of these sources, the articles that I had them read, some of which were challenging for them, but I think they gave them a handle on how to redefine the American dream, perhaps. And I was interested to push my own a bit to interrogate the narrative of exceptionalism, American exceptionalism in particular. So see how that worked out. And finally, for my title, I'm not sure what it means actually. No, but the narrative of American exceptionalism, W.E.B. Du Bois had this binary paradigm of American assumption way back, in the 30s, and he said, he asked, will ours be a future of freedom, intelligence, and power for all, or industry for private profit, directed by an autocracy determined at any price to amass wealth and power? I said, say what? Yeah. Well, what will it be? What will it be? So I think he's thinking for us there in terms of this American assumption that he's hoping for that sort of future. And I think that's where we might have to leave it at this point. Got no final comments, but thanks so much for sticking with us. And, I think I'm out of water and out of jokes. So.